Welcome to the USS Indianapolis Legacy Reunion Wrap-Up. So in early July 2023, we held our quasi-annual reunion for USS Indianapolis Legacy Organization in Benicia, California. And we had several terrific events. One of those events, which we didn't get good video for, was Ben Huntley and retired Admiral Sam Cox presenting the transition that occurred to the USS Indianapolis ship during that winter-spring 1945 final refit in Mare Island, California. And the really cool thing about this is the presentation was actually made in the chapel at Mare Island shipyard, where the Indianapolis went to that refit. And since we didn't get great video and audio from that day, Ben Huntley, who presented with us that day, has graciously agreed to reprise his role in presenting a summary of those modifications. And so please help me welcome Ben. And so, hey, Ben, how are you?
Hi there. I'm doing great. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. So you ended up doing that presentation 3 times that day, right?
Yeah, I'd like to think it got better each time, so we'll see how it goes today.
I'm sure it did. It was fantastic the first time. I sat in with Group 1, and it was fantastic even then. That's why I wanted to record it and get it so that everybody else who wasn't there can see it too, because there was a lot of important information that was provided during that presentation. I hope you agree.
Yeah, I had a great time putting it together, so I think there's some little gems in here we can review.
Yeah, unfortunately, Sam Cox, who is the Navy's Director of Naval History and Heritage Command, could not be with us today to help his bit in the presentation, but I'm sure you're going to cover that very ably. So you ready to jump in, Ben?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, over to you then.
Okay. So as Bill mentioned, this presentation was originally done as part of the 2023 reunion for the Indianapolis. So we had a little bit of a ruse where we were pretending to be recruits, and today is the day that you're going to learn about your ship that is just over there in that dry dock. And so this is kind of a review of that. So let's see what we get here. Unfortunately, Admiral Cox and Jeff Minnie are not going to be able to join me today. I'll try to do their parts justice here as we go along. So the first part of this presentation, we're going to talk about a little bit about the role of shipyards in the Navy, kind of a little bit about the scale of the work and how long warships last. This slide here was Admiral Cox's slide to present, but I'll see if I can do justice of his presentation here. I think the first thing that he said was that as soon as you launch a ship, the ocean is trying to destroy it. And the only way that you can keep a warship operational is to continually maintain it through very carefully paying attention to all of the details. So to that end, the United States had a whole series of shipyards. Many of them were closed in 1996, which includes Mare Island Naval Shipyard, which I think does some commercial work and is partly a museum now. And that is where this presentation actually took place, was in the chapel at Mare Island Naval Shipyard. Of interest is this picture here. This is actually the USS Constitution. It's a ship that Admiral Cox is responsible for maintaining. It's been afloat for 200-something years at this point, so he seems to be doing a pretty good job. I think he's got some authority when it comes to talking about maintaining ships. So let's move on. Part 2. So we're going to talk a little bit here about the USS Indianapolis in particular, how it changed, where the work happened, how often Indy came to Mare Island, and a little bit about what caused the last refit for Indianapolis in 1945. And then at the conclusion of this section, we'll look at one particular day in Indianapolis's life on July 12th of 1945. So Indy was a Portland-class cruiser. They were designed for ship-to-ship fighting using their main armament and speed. So those 9 8-inch guns or rifles, as you might say, were the primary weapon system on the ship. And it was designed to maneuver with a fleet. And you hear things about crossing the T and scouting forces and trying to outmaneuver the opponent. And so Indy used those powerful guns and speed to do that. As World War II ground on, we all know that the aircraft came to be the dominant weapon, especially in the Pacific. And Indy evolved over the course of the war to answer that need. So by the end of the war, her duties were really shore bombardment to prepare for invasions and anti-aircraft defense for the rest of the fleet, so keeping the carriers safe from the enemy's aircraft. It's a little bit cut off on the slide there, but it's a little table here just to show how much Indy changed throughout the war. In 1939, she had only 8 light anti-aircraft guns aboard and no medium anti-aircraft guns. They were just 50 cal guns that would shoot, a bullet about the size of your pinky. And by 1945, all of those light machine guns were replaced with twice as many 20 millimeter cannons, which actually fired explosive projectiles closer to the size of your thumb that would actually explode and were much more effective at downing enemy aircraft. And importantly, too, she went from having 0 medium anti-aircraft guns to 24 40 millimeter Bofors cannons by the end of the war. That's a lot of firepower, and those were extremely effective. And some of those were actually radar guided. And all of this came at a price. At the beginning of the war, Indy weighed something like 11,000 tons when she was fully loaded. And by the end of the war, she was tipping the scales at 15,000 tons. So she put on a little weight throughout the war. I think let's think of it perhaps as muscle and not anything around the middle. But we'll try not to talk about Indy's weight from now on. So where did all this work happen? I'm showing you a map here of Mare Island shipyard, and this is where most of Indy's refit work happened. She did visit Pearl Harbor and I think Hunter's Point as well. But this map shows the layout of the buildings there. It was a pretty expansive base during the wartime there. Dry Dock 1 is of interest, especially for those of you that went on the tour. That's where we actually walked to. The chapel is pointed out. That's where this talk was given. And Berth 21 and the finger piers over there are also important because that's where most of the non-dry dock refit work happened for Indy. So throughout the years, changing from a cartographer's map to Google Earth there, everything goes into color. You can see that most of those buildings are still here today. They've been repurposed. Some of them are restaurants and breweries now, and there's more housing on the island. And then some of those finger piers there, you can see they've silted up a little bit from during the war. So let's talk more in particular about the actual refits. When did Indy visit? Focusing just on her wartime visits here. The first was in spring of 1942. This was a refit after the campaign in New Guinea. All those striking architectural features. The Indy used to have a spray guard above the bridge that was removed. A bunch of her portholes were welded shut, and she gained some 20 millimeter cannons at this time in 1942. Next visit came in 1943. This was after the Aleutian Island campaign, so after her sinking of a transport ship off those islands there, she came back and picked up a entirely new mast on the aft half of the ship there for radar and some more spotting capability, and some 40 millimeter cannons were added at this point. Coming back into May of 1944, She picked up a really dazzling paint job. This was designed to make it hard for the enemy to sight her outline or make out just how far away she was. Again, more and more radar equipment is getting added in these nearly annual visits. And this visit was after her action at Marshall's, the Gilberts, Marianas, and Guam. Next visit comes in December of 1944. So this is when she picked up the two-tone paint that she had for the last half of the war. She was painted blue down low and then a sky color up high. And the intention was that she would appear further away than she actually was if an enemy was like visually trying to scout her or get some range for bombardment. And she picked up those 40 millimeter guns on the fantail there that are circled in that picture, and some new bridge platforms that made it easier to spot aircraft. She put all those new cannons to work in March at Okinawa, as we know, and she downed 6 aircraft that brought her total up to 9. But she did suffer some damage there. She was a victim of a kamikaze attack in Okinawa, and this picture shows the hole that was left in the deck. So through that hole, an armor-piercing 500-pound bomb fell through there, followed by the body of the Japanese aircraft, where the engine actually dropped right into that hole and kind of bounced off the side of the ship into the ocean there. So that caused some pretty severe flooding, and Indy actually lost one of her 4 propellers, and was forced to return to Mare Island for refits. So after that last visit in May to July of 1945, Indy picks up this profile that we've all seen of her in those famous photos. She's just bristling with anti-aircraft guns, the new radar directors for her main battery and for her 5-inch battery. Basically, everywhere that a gun could be put on the deck, there was a gun on the deck. She's a very full ship at that point. And then in July 16th, she departed for Tinian with atomic bomb components aboard. And the building that you're seeing there is building 627A at the Mare Island shipyard. It has train tracks that come in and out of that building. It's a fairly large building. I think that photo is actually from World War I, but I think the components, not the fissile material for the little boy bombs, were stored in that building prior to leaving on July 16th. I think. It's a little bit of a rumor. I feel a little bad saying it, but we're pretty confident on those potentially facts. So next, I think we're going to take a quick look at the damage that, how did Indy look when she came into dry dock? Well, we see in the plans in the background there, panning left and right. That highlighted area there is the flooded area, and that star is where that bomb that we talked about actually fell through the ship and exploded in the water underneath the ship. Lifted the whole ship, bent a whole bunch of decking and plates and bulkheads, caused all that flooding there in that highlighted area. The view that's coming into view there now, you can see the path that the aircraft took straight down into the ship, and then the path of the bomb through the ship. It hit the 4th propeller shaft there, broke it off, and then everything that was shaded in that view there was actually replaced at Mare Island in spring and early summer of 1945. So that photograph there should be 2 propellers in that photograph, but you can only see one there because of the one that was left behind in Okinawa. If you squint, you can see that the convex shape of the hole there is actually concave, where the bomb exploded and bent all that plate back in. That's, I believe, something like 5/8 inch thick steel plate there that was bent. It's just an incredibly violent explosion. And we're not entirely sure if this is Dry Dock 1 or Dry Dock 2 at Mare Island, but this photo comes from Alfred J. Sedivi, and it is definitely taken just after Indy came into dry dock. One of the things that set Mare Island apart from the other naval shipyards was the level at which they documented their work. We're zooming into one of the photographs that was taken on nearly the last day of that refit. This is July 12th, 1945. And you should be able to see here some crewmen working on the connections for equipment inside CIC, which is just behind that wall there. We've got a couple guys down here, probably from the radio room, that are trying to figure out the last minute connections there. The level of detail in these photos is just amazing. You can see onto the open bridge there. That open bridge there really helped with looking for aircraft up above. There's no ceiling to get in your way there, no overhead. Bill, I know I'm using land lubber terms here for the parts. You'll have to correct me later.
You're doing great. Keep going.
But the one of the other things you might look to in this photo is on that last night before Indy was sunk. We know that a lot of the crew was sleeping on deck, and you can see how they might just nestle under those overhangs on the back of the turrets. There'd be a really nice place to roll in and sleep out of the way there. And you can also see just how thin and svelte the bow of this ship is here. That's foreshadowing. We'll get to that later. But she was a very slender, very fast ship, and it's just all of the detail in this photo is just amazing to see. The detail is just amazing. This passageway down here, hatch, goes into the main radio room here. So this would have been a very busy place on that last night and late in July there. So everything that's circled in these photos is something new from that last refit. I love this photo because you can see these guys painting here on the bow of the ship. I got the 48 star jack flying there because the ship is in port. And as we pan along through this photo, let's see what else we can see here. We've got the capstan for the anchors here. We've got some 20 millimeter cannons. I believe Harpo was sleeping between those on the last night there. And you can see the main battery, those 8-inch guns there. And then as we pan up, you can just see all of the antennas, the radio and radar equipment that was just added and added and added to Indy over the years. So everything circled here, again, is new in that last refit, some kind of change. So those 20 millimeter cannons were added. And there's the anchors there. It looks to me like this guy's wearing some awfully nice shoes for painting work, but it's interesting. I love how these photos are just so unposed. This is just a moment in time on the ship. You can see someone's just sitting down to take a break there. Another crew painting there. Again, circled in the back there, you can see some of the radar equipment for radar guiding those Bofors cannons and the new crane that was added for the new aircraft that came in at this refit. Zooming in a little bit on the bridge there, I want to draw your attention to the tally marks here. You can see she's got 9 marks there for 9 kills at this point in the war. And then you can see some of the radar equipment for the main battery there above the bridge. And as we zoom out, you can see some of the crew down here on this around the Bofors cannon there. You can not really see into the aircraft hangar there, but that's what you're looking at back there. Since the photo is taken at noon, you can see even outline and shadows of the rivets on the side of the ship. And as we zoom back out, you'll be able to see that 2-inch steel, I believe, armor belt that's around the exterior of the ship there to protect the engineering spaces. But just feast your eyes on these images here. They're just amazing. All the guys that we know are probably on the ship at this point. Those guys out there hanging out on the deck there while the crane controls there. Maybe we know one of those. I think was it Survivor Irwin was responsible for operating the crane, I think, at some point. So maybe he's one of those guys. Who knows? As we look at the aft part of the ship here, again, you can see more of the spotlights, radar spotting equipment, and some of the safety equipment that would be used just 2 weeks later. So you can see where the rafts were stowed. Those would have had to have been cut down at the time of the sinking. Here's a view of the quarterdeck. You can see a couple sailors hanging out in the shade here. I know that Mr. Bucket had an office there in the base of one of those catapult towers there. So maybe he's hanging out in this view. Who knows? You can see the new two.
If I can interrupt,
One of the
aircraft sticking out of the hangars there, the port hangar was emptied for that payload, the big wooden crate with the nuclear components for the bomb. And so at some point, remember, the Indianapolis was a late choice for transporting the bomb. And so they once they decided it was going to be the Indianapolis, not the Portland, they had to yank those aircraft off.
Yeah, at least one of them anyway. Yeah, so that one, maybe that's what's going on right there. They're pulling that aircraft out of the port hangar. Yeah, I just love how these photos are so unposed. They have this like Norman Rockwell character about them. You can see everyone's busy doing something. Just a snapshot moment in time here.
And
these guys are getting ready to set out.
Is if the viewers have ever watched the Discovery, the 2017 Discovery of the Indianapolis on the bottom, you'll see many of these same components on the bottom of the ocean, including the anchor with the star on it, and the aircraft with floats.
Yeah.
There's on the bottom, the 5-inch gun, the 8-inch guns, and many of these gun buckets are shown in that video as well.
Yeah, we'll take a look at them later here shortly. So, all right. So continuing on, while all that busy stuff was happening on the ship, we were trying to bring the audience at the time to the time and the place. Establish the Indianapolis at Mare Island, and so Jeff Minnie joined us, who had 4 generations of his family working in the shipyard there, to bring some a little bit of the local flavor. Like on that last Liberty, what might the crew have been doing? So they were out and about in San Francisco. This bar was in Mare Island, not Mare Island, but Vallejo, and just all sorts of activities that they would have been involved in there. I think Jeff Minnie's mother is actually in this photo here on the streetcar in San Francisco. That would have been in 1945. There were theaters, there were bars, there were underground brothels. There was all sorts of stuff going on in Vallejo there at the time. And I think it had a nickname of like Little Reno or something like that. Here's a shot of Lower Georgia Street where I think Harold Bray, survivor Harold Bray, was quoted as saying it from the ship when you looked across the strait there, that it just looked like a sea of white sailor caps flowing up and down that Lower Georgia Street there, as everyone was taking in the activities there while they were ashore on that last Liberty. So we've got dancing, rooms for rent, walking around. There's all kinds of stuff going on down there in Vallejo. So I know I can't do justice as Jeff Minnie would have for narrating these photos, but I hope it gives a sense for just the time and the place. There's Bob Hope entertaining the sailors in front of the medical center there on the Mare Island shipyard, and there's a ferry that the sailors would have taken back and forth. So some quick scenes there on the island. I'm going to move on from there.
Mm-hmm.
So next part of the talk here is a last look. So we're going to take a moment to compare those last refit photos with the current state of Indy as she was seen in 2017 by Petrel. So to open this section, Admiral Cox came and kind of helped to explain why we have these refit photos available at the National History and Heritage Command. And that was because 2 reasons. One was the Nicolas Cage movie about Indianapolis, and then the other was at the Paul Allen's Petrel research ship. At their urging, Admiral Cox had Richard Holver, I think, and a couple others on his staff dredge up as much of the data about the Indianapolis as they could to make sure that all of the true facts were out there if you wanted to find out about them. So there's a little bit of a timeline here for that last couple of weeks for Indy. So she left July 16th from Hunters Point. 26th of July, she dropped off those atomic bomb components that were carried in the port hangar and welded to the deck in the admiral's quarters at Tinian. Just 4 days later, she was sunk in the middle of the Philippine Sea. And then just after the survivors of the crew were recovered, that first atom bomb was dropped in Hiroshima, Japan. And then many, many years later, 2017, on August 19th, the Petrel rediscovered the wreck on the bottom of the sea. And they sent us some amazing photos. And we're going to look at a couple of those side by side with the Refit photos here. So the first is, you remember that photo we looked at with the men painting the bow of the ship? Well, also in that photo is the capstan. And if you look carefully at the capstan there, which has a heavy anchor chain wrapped around it, you can see that star embossed in the steel there. And now that star is still there on the bottom of the sea, some 4,500 meters deep. It's in pristine condition. Those guys that were painting must have done a really good job. Paint is still there. Steel is still in good shape. It's just incredibly dark. No oxygen down there. Just an amazing photo of the first 60 feet or so of that ship after the torpedo took it off. Just amazing to think about how inaccessible that is now. Remember I brought your attention to those tally marks on the bridge wing? Turns out that the Petrel found that exact piece of steel on the bottom. And look, there it is. In living color still red tally marks. Just amazing. Next photo was when we were looking at the forward half of the ship, there was a spare float for one of the SC-1 spotting planes there. And looks like somehow in the course of the sinking that float came loose, and you can see it there on the bottom of the sea. Incredible shape. Also here, this is one of those Bofors mounts that was added. You can see it kind of has a little balcony and overhangs the walkway and the hand lines around the ship there. We know that when Admiral Spruance would take his walks, he was fond of doing laps on the just outside the forgetting above the main deck there on the forecastle. He would walk laps around there, and so that hatch that you see open there in that photo was one that he probably would have walked in and out of many times. That goes directly into the captain's cabin, which is connected to the admiral's cabin on the port side of the ship there. So you can just imagine Admiral Spruance walking laps there, trying to catch just a bit of shade as he passes under that Bofors mount, which we can still see there at the bottom of the sea. Here's one of the port side 5-inch gun mounts. You can see all the white corrosion building up here. This happens anywhere that two dissimilar kinds of metals were together. So this might have been some aluminum and steel, or brass and steel, or something like that was here. And we have this galvanic corrosion that builds up, and some sea life growing on things down there as well. But it's just amazing, the detail there. I don't know exactly which gun this is, but I believe it is on the port side of the ship. And we also have one of the radar-directed 40 millimeter Bofors mounts here. A great shot of that from the Petrel. This one is on the starboard side of the ship. I think it's the aftmost one there with a splinter shield around it, and it still has that brand new radar guiding equipment attached to that dual Bofors mount there, the 40 millimeter cannon. And I think this is the last of the comparison shots that I have. Shows the view of the back of the forward superstructure. You can see the speaker circled there for the 1MC, and then just below that is the ship's bell, still there. I know Petrel spent some time looking around to find this ship's bell. It's kind of symbolic of the ship, but there it is. So the last words here are really for the tour, or for the audience in the chapel there. Their next step was to leave the chapel, just to walk a couple blocks down to see dry dock 1 or 2 where Indy would have been, and it just would have been an incredibly busy scene in 1945. 40,000 workers on that island coming and going daily. And the ship would have been getting ready for its last final secret mission there, and ready to sail into the Golden Gate in just a couple days. So that's, I believe, the end of the presentation there. So thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy.
That was really, really good, Ben. Thank you so much. Yeah, so going over the heads of a lot of the viewers is that, as you said up front, we had the attendees of the reunion play roles, and their roles were that they were going to be replacement crew. It was 1945, and a third of the crew transferred off of the Indianapolis, and so there was a new third, a lot of 17, 18, 19-year-olds reporting aboard, and asked the attendees of the reunion. We issued them sailor hats, and asked them to pretend that they were those replacements and try to get in the minds of those guys as they were about to go off on their last liberty. And this was supposed to be their indoctrination to their new ship and the changes that had taken place during this Mare Island refit after the kamikaze attack. So, with that in mind, that's why the language was written the way it was, and the secret mission that they're about. I thought it was very effective, and I'm very grateful to you for continuing to play along with the roles we had provided to everybody.
Yeah, so I forgot to bring my my little Dixie cup. Yeah.
Well, I doubt you would have been an enlisted man given that brief the way it was. So, but really well done, and good job covering for both Admiral Cox and the crew. Yeah.
One last word I want to mention too is that all of that information that I shared there is publicly available. Admiral Cox is with the National History and Heritage Command, has all of those high resolution photos available. There's actually a specific section of their website devoted to the Indianapolis, so you can find all of that yourself. So if you're a relative or a family member in some way with the Indianapolis, look through those photos and see if you can find your person there. There's some incredible detail there. The other photos come from the U.S. Naval Institute, with, I believe, your help, Bill, with Sadivi's photos there. So thank you for that. And the National Archives also has a great deal of information. Actually, plans. You can drill in and find individual rooms and their labels, and you can surmise like who may have been present there in those particular places on the ship. So there's some great information out there if you're willing to dig for it.
Yeah, we ask people to contribute in whatever way they can, and one of the ways that I was able to contribute was digitizing. I paid to digitize a lot of those photographs so that they could be shared with this community, and you stop the degradation of the photos once you digitize them. That was really the main concern. So great.
It's great to be able to put them to use and share them with everyone.
And as always, we ask everybody to keep the stories alive of the Indianapolis. We'll keep presenting as much information as we can. This briefing will be available both on YouTube and the website. And as the survivors always used to say when they signed off, never give up. And as the legacy organization likes to say, never forget. So thank you again, Ben, for doing this. Appreciate it. Great recovery from our failed attempt to record you doing it in Mare. But now we've got it. So thanks.
All right.
Take care.
From the bottom of my